Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're venturing into a topic that might sound a bit funny at first. Pogonophobia.
That's right, the fear of beards.
Exactly. It comes from the Greek pogon for beard, phobos for fear, and, while people might joke about it sometime,
Uh-huh.
our sources show it actually opens up this, really surprisingly rich history and cultural stuff, too.
Yeah, definitely. We've looked at quite a mix, from the basic psych definition through to historical accounts and even some pretty lively media debates. So the goal here really is to go beyond just saying fear of beards. We want to get into the nuances, right?
Unpack it a bit.
And uncover some, well, unexpected things our sources brought up.
Okay, so let's start with history then, because this one source from way back in 1851,
David Smith.
the Covenanter.
That's the one. He talks about a veritable pogonophobia among Jesuits in Baden, which is interesting enough, but is apparently triggered by seeing a democratic chin. A democratic chin? What's that even about? Well, that's the fascinating part, isn't it? It shows this really strong link back then between beards and political ideas. In the mid-1800s, having a full beard wasn't just hair. It could signal you were breaking from the establishment, from the aristocracy.
Ah, okay, so less fear of hair, more fear of what it stood for.
Exactly. That phrase, democratic chin, really suggests beards were tied to liberal, maybe even revolutionary thinking. So the Jesuits weren't just reacting to a beard itself, probably. It was the symbol, what it represented in that whole political climate.
Right.
Yeah, personal appearance and political signals all wrapped up together. A beard could be a visible sign of where you stood, maybe even a dangerous one for some people.
That's wild. Thinking a beard is
Yeah.
dangerous politics. Okay, so fast forward a bit. There's also a psychological angle, right, from the 1920s.
John B. Watson, the behaviorist.
Psychologist, the famous one, yeah. Apparently, some psychological literature says he used classical conditioning. Basically, trained a young boy to fear beards.
Yeah, that's the account. Classical conditioning is, well, it's about creating associations. So you take something neutral, like a beard, pair it with something negative, and eventually the beard itself causes fear.
Okay.
Now, the ethics of doing that kind of experiment today, completely different story, obviously.
Right.
But it did demonstrate a way these specific fears could potentially develop, how they can be learned, and maybe how society's anxieties about appearance could get reinforced, even accidentally.
Okay, so we've got historical politics, learned psychological responses. What about just, general society and culture?
Right. So Christopher Oldstone Moore, writing much more recently in 2013,
Uh-huh.
he pointed out that over the last century or so, facial hair often got associated with this suspicious streak of individuality and defiance.
Suspicious defiance. That sounds pretty strong.
It is. He even suggested that for people in certain jobs, like politics or journalism, growing a beard could actually damage their reputation.
Really? Just for having a beard?
Yeah. It kind of highlights how deep these norms about appearance can run. And this connects to that idea of beardism.
Beardism. Like prejudice against beards.
Exactly. Discrimination based purely on facial hair. And you can see how those negative perceptions Oldstone Moore mentioned could lead to real disadvantages for people. Plus, our sources mention how much culture matters. In some places, beards are, revered. Wisdom, religion.
Right, I saw that. Like in Judaism or Islam, there are specific rules sometimes requiring them or forbidding them. That must shape how people see them.
Absolutely. It shapes the societal norms in a really powerful way.
And then there's the other side. The sources also mention associations with maybe being unhygienic, sometimes unfairly linked to, say, homeless people.
That perception exists too. And then you just have general fashion trends constantly changing things as well. It's a real mix.
So many different signals packed into just facial hair.
Precisely. History, culture, religion, hygiene worries, fashion. It all feeds into why one person might react with fear, maybe even pogonophobia, while another sees the same thing as, respectable or attractive.
Okay, this mix of sensitivities, it kind of exploded into the public eye a bit in 2013, didn't it? With that whole BBC incident.
Yes. Jeremy Paxman.
Right. He grew a beard for presenting Newsnight, got some flack for it.
Quite a bit of criticism.
And then he jokingly accused the BBC of having pogonophobia.
He did, and he made those funny comparisons, didn't he, to Uncle Albert from Only Fools and Horses.
Yeah, and Demis Roussos, the singer. And even Enver Hoxha, the Albanian dictator.
It was quite the list. His reaction really spotlighted how absurd it seemed, for a major broadcaster to potentially have this bias against beards.
What's funny, too, is that Paxman apparently said he doesn't even like beards normally.
Exactly, which made it even more ironic when he said he'd become this reluctant poster boy for the Beard Liberation Front. A heavy burden, I think he called it.
Huh. But not everyone at the BBC agreed with him, did they? There was that other presenter.
Danny Baker
Mm-hmm.
on Radio 5 Live. Yeah, he was quite open about disagreeing with Paxman having a beard on Newsnight.
He brought up Disney, right?
He did. He mentioned Disney's long ban on employees having beards, which, amazingly, was only lifted in 2012.
Wow, after nearly 60 years.
Yeah. That Disney example really shows how these appearance standards can get embedded in big organizations for decades.
Whether it's actual phobia or just, like, wanting a certain look.
Exactly. It points to those often unspoken rules about professional image, how deep they can run.
And then there's that other phrase the sources mention, fear the beard. You hear that in sports a lot.
Oh, yeah, that's a great counterpoint.
It totally flips it, doesn't it? The beard becomes a symbol of, like, power or intimidation, something opponents should fear, but in a competitive way.
Precisely. It shows how context just completely changes the meaning. In sports, it's about being formidable. It's celebrated.
So it's not really pogonophobia in that case.
No, not in the clinical sense. It just highlights how flexible the symbolism of a beard is. It can mean wildly different things depending on where and when you see it.
Okay, so let's try and pull this all together then. Pogonophobia. It might sound lighthearted, maybe even a bit silly, but it seems to have, well, actual historical roots and maybe some psychological basis in how fears are learned.
Yeah, those elements are there in the sources. But what really comes through strongly is just how much cultural context matters. Societal norms, political meanings that get attached, religious significance, they all massively shape how beards are perceived and potentially feared.
And that BBC example is like a modern snapshot of all that, isn't it?
Yeah.
Professional image, company culture, individual expression, all clashing over a beard.
Exactly. A really neat illustration of these tensions playing out.
It's pretty amazing, really, how something seemingly so simple, so, just hair, can connect to all these big things, history, psychology, culture wars even.
It really can.
So maybe a final thought then for you listening. We've seen how beard acceptance has shifted over time and all the different factors that play into how we see them. It makes you wonder, doesn't it? What does the future hold for facial hair and maybe the anxieties around it?
What unspoken biases might we still carry? Not just about beards, maybe, but other things we notice about appearance. Things that seem minor.
Yeah, definitely something to think about. How much weight do we give these little details without even realizing it?